Greetings. It's been a while since I did a video on this channel. I've done them on my other channel, but it's been about 7 months. And I thought it was time to do one here because, well, this is supposed to be talking about healthcare type of things. And I'm going to talk about two different healthcare things that have happened with me over the last month and a half. So this it's strange, but this is just how life goes. So first, I'm going to talk about my latest appointment with the Joslin Center because I'm diabetic and I go see them every 3 months. Now, 3 months ago, I had an appointment with another new nurse practitioner, and we really didn't get along all that well. We don't get along that well because they keep wanting to try to get me to take other stuff. And after the fiasco I had back in 2024 when they put me on Trulicity and some other stuff, and then I didn't eat for like 3 days, I said, no, I'm not going that route anymore. So they're still trying to find things for me to take. And we just didn't really, get going. And a week before I had the appointment scheduled, I get this letter or email from the Johnson Center, and they have another nurse's name on it. I said, oh my goodness, y'all just gonna like go through a cycle and give me different people? Am I that difficult? And it turns out that the day before I got something, and that was on a Sunday when I got something, and I was back to one of the nurses that I had before. She's nice. I think she's scared of me. I don't know, but it works out okay. And so I go there, and the guy who they take you in the back and they take the vitals, the blood pressure and some of the other stuff and whatever, and they weigh me on the scale, and he does my blood pressure, and he says, well, your blood pressure is 145 over 103. I said, I don't think that's a legitimate number. I think there's probably something wrong with that. He says, well, that's what this thing is telling me it is, so I'll put this down and we'll leave it up to the nurse to figure it out. I said, okay, we'll do that. And that was weird. And then she comes in, and I mentioned to her that he had got me this weird blood pressure number. So she does it, and she says, well, it's 144 over 81. I said, well, okay, that sounds a lot better. She says, well, it's still kind of high. And I'm thinking, how do they keep telling me that? Because back in the day, great number used to be 140 over 80. And now 145 over 81 is scary. I don't get it. I don't know. So anyhow, we start having this conversation, and she's still trying to talk me into getting something else. It's like they all want me to take something. And I said, well, there was this one thing that someone mentioned, and I said, I'd look into it, and I go to the pharmacy, and they got it, and the deductible was $660. I said, I'm not paying that. There's just no way. And I called the insurance company, and they said, well, yeah, that's what they came up with, but we're looking at it, and it's around $325. I said, I'm still not paying that kind of money for something new. I'm just not going to do it. I have a part-time job. Yes, I got Social Security, got a part-time job. Like, no, I'm not paying for that. So we talked a little bit more, and she said, well, we're going to look at something else, and we're going to see what we can do. Okay, fine. And then after talking with her, I went and I talked to one of the nutritionist people, and that was illuminating. I needed that. I need a refresher. Talk about eating more protein, talk about some of the binges that I have, and her saying, well, that's not really all that bad because it's not like you're doing it every single day. Thank you for her. Thank you for her. I told her how I bought a bag of Puffs. Y'all know Puffs. And I hadn't bought one of those in like 2 or 3 years. And I brought it home, and I waited a couple of days. And then I sat down at the desk, and I started eating it. And the entire bag was empty in 30 minutes. Sometimes stuff just gets into your body, and you just want that. And so I told her that happened. And she says, well, truth of the matter is that Puffs don't really have a whole lot of calories. You don't want to do that every day, but if you can find a way to put some in a bowl and go that way instead of the bag, at least you'll eat, less of it all in one sitting. But don't beat yourself up over that. I like her. I really like her. So anyway, I drive home and there's a message on the phone when I get home. And it's one of those kind of things where it's the pharmacy and they want me to call them. And so I call them. And I said, yeah, I got a call from y'all. You're saying I've got something coming in. I don't know about anything that's coming in. And the lady there says, well, yes, we see something here. And right now there's a thing going on between the doctor and the Jocelyn Center regarding the coverage. And the doctors want to know what that's all about. I don't even know. No one told me that I was supposed to be getting a new medication of any kind. And she says, well, we're going to find out and hopefully we'll get back to you soon. Well, it was a couple days later when I got something saying that there's a medication that has been approved for you to take. And I said, okay, I don't know what that is. And so what happens is I go onto the portal for the health, for Jocelyn Center, and I look it up and it says, yes, you have a new medication, but they don't say what medication it is. They don't tell me what it's supposed to do, but they've got something. So I go to the pharmacy and I said, yeah, I, got this thing saying that supposedly there's some kind of pharmacy here. No one has told me what it is, but I guess I'm supposed to, look at this. So the people behind the counter, they go and they bring it over and she says, I can't pronounce this either. I said, well, join the club. No one seems to understand what this is. And that deductible was $181. And I said, you know what? No, I'm not ready for that. I need to find out what it is. No one called me, told me I was going to be taking it. Nothing. I want to know what this is. And she says, well, I'm not really sure what it is. I said, okay, won't be your problem. I'll figure it out. So I come home and I look it up online and I finally found a word. It's pronounced Farxiga, Farxiga. I didn't know that's how it was pronounced until the day after. So I look it up and it mentions all these different things that it's supposed to help with. But it doesn't say, okay, is there a dose? How does this work? I don't get this. And I, got one of their web pages, or I got a web page off of DuckDuckGo because that's what I use as, to search. And I read this thing and said, it's still not telling me anything. So the next day I go to work. Now it's a Thursday, and I work in a pharmacy. It's called Genoa Healthcare, and I sit next to the pharmacist. So I said, hey, can you tell me there's something here? I don't even know how you pronounce it. And I start spelling it Farx, and she says, oh, Farxiga. Well, okay, at least now I know how it's pronounced. So what is this? Because I looked it up and I couldn't find anything. And she says that it's a, medicine where it's supposed to, it sounds stupid, but this is just what they said. She said, it's the kind of medication. It's for people who are diabetes and might have trouble, keeping everything under control. So you take this thing, and then when you go to the bathroom, when you urinate, it's supposed to also eliminate excess glucose in your body. I said, really? That doesn't sound right. And she said, well, yeah, there's people who have, lost between 20 and 25 pounds. I said, but I don't want to lose 20 to 25 pounds. I've weighed pretty much the same weight for like 7 or 8 years, sometimes 3 or 4 pounds higher, sometimes 3 or 4 pounds lower. I don't understand all this. She says, well, in essence, the doctors will sometimes ask, their patients to take this because they have found that it does help people. It eliminates certain glucose, and then over time, the more glucose that gets eliminated, the lower your glucose levels will show on the sensor or on the receiver, and that's supposed to, help you lose weight. And I said, so is that another injection? I already take 2 injections a day. She says, oh no, it's a pill. I said, oh, it's a pill? Well, that didn't say it online either. It didn't say it was so now it's some kind of pill. I said, well, I didn't say that I was definitely going to do it. I asked them to keep it on hold, and I told them that I would look at it, after the fact. So I had told the people at the pharmacy that I need to see how things are looking. The next time I get paid, I may come back in and get it. Can you hold it for a week at least? She says, yes, we'll hold it for a week. I said, good stuff. Now, the week after that, I go to a place in the city of Syracuse. It's called the Nappy Center, and it's affiliated with one of the major hospitals in town, and it's on the 6th floor, and I've never been to the 6th floor. And this is to look at my feet for neuropathy and everything. It was recommended by someone else I know who is one of the people who I deliver something to, and she went there and she said, these people are great, and they've given me some ideas, and my foot pain has gone down. I said, oh, okay, you know what? I'll give it a shot. So I get there, and mentally, I'm not interested. I mean, I was having trouble focusing on that day. I really wasn't sure what was going to happen. I was kind of, just in a malaise. But, they get me in there, and I get this nurse. And she runs a bunch of different tests on me. And that was interesting. And it wasn't being me, but the me that I was on this particular day, I was just chill. I'm just, whatever she wants to do. And she ran some kind of test on my feet, put some kind of thing on it. And I wasn't necessarily happy about that. My feet are cold almost all the time. And then she puts more cold on it. And I was not a happy guy with that, but I didn't exhibit that I wasn't happy. Because I was, like I said, I'm trying to be chill, but that was kind of a tough one. So then she looks at, she does that. She goes out of the room for like 4 or 5 minutes. She comes back and says, well, the test was inconclusive. And my mind is, how come every test I take seems to be inconclusive? I don't know. So she leaves, and then this doctor comes in. And I got to tell you the truth, he looked like a kid. I thought he was like maybe 23 or 24 years old. He's probably older than that, but he looked like a kid. And he was kind of deadpan. And now I'm talking with him. And it was one of those kind of things where, like I said, I wasn't really mentally ready for this appointment, but I went, anyhow. And I was in there with him about 30 minutes. And it's like he got used to me, because suddenly at a certain point, he started smiling, and he was, he didn't look like he didn't want to be there anymore. Now he's interested in whatever. And then he runs another test on my feet, different than the one she did. And then that one was inconclusive. I said, well, what can I do? I don't know. He says, well, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to look at this, what the Johnson Center has. I'm going to look at what we've come up with, and, we'll see what we can do. But he says, but I'm going to give you this kind of coupon thing, and you can go to, and he names this place. It turns out it's like 2 blocks away from where I work, so that should work out. He says, this gets you 3 free pairs of shoes. I said, wait, what? He says, yes, 3 pairs of shoes. They have a whole bunch of things, but you can go there and find 3 pairs of shoes that makes your feet feel better. Some of them might have inserts, some might not. They have inserts there that maybe that counts as a pair of shoes, but it's something that, that should help you in a way. I said, well, okay, free shoes and working on the feet, that'll work. So I come home, and I was just out of it. So I go take a nap. I sleep about an hour, Then I come out and say, okay, let me go find that stuff that guy gave me. It ain't nowhere in the house. I said, oh my God. I go and look in the car. It's not in the car. I said, oh boy. Well, I'll figure something out at a certain point. And then I get an email about a week later from them saying that, so we have an appointment scheduled for you on May 4th, and it mentioned some kind of service. I said, wait, no one told me I had another appointment coming in. So I send a message through the portal. Said, yeah, y'all have scheduled me for an appointment, but no one has told me what the appointment is for. I know it's not with Jocelyn, so it's got to be with you guys, but this doesn't say anything. And then she sends me a message the next day through the portal saying that, yes, this is something we want to do another type of test on your feet because the first two were inconclusive. Okay. And it's at 2 in the afternoon. I usually get all of my appointments by 8:30 or between 8:30 and 9. So now this is 2. I'm like, oh man, but that's just how that is every once in a while, I guess. So that's today. So today I have to be there around 4 after I first go down to the Johnson Center because that's where it turns out the paperwork that I was supposed to take with me so that I could get the free shoes, they sent it down there. So now I get off at the 5th floor. I walk up, ask for this thing from the Nappy Center. Then I go up to the Nappy Center to do the test. That sounds convoluted, but there you go. I have no idea what it's going to be, but I didn't like the 2 tests they did with me when I was with them before, so now I'm going to have another test I'm not happy about. Here's the thing, though. I appreciate that both the Jocelyn Center and the people in the Nappy Center for, the neuropathy, they're actually doing something. Even if we haven't totally agreed, even if I don't always understand what they're telling me or what they're trying to do, at least they're trying to do something. Because I had a physical back, I think, was it August or September, had an appointment. I hadn't had a physical in like 3 or 4 years. And the physical lasted 7 minutes. That was it. They had to send me something in the mail so that I could do what they call it's not a colonoscopy, but they sent me this box from a company called Cologuard, where you have to, you have to set something up on the toilet and then you got to do your business. And that was weird. That took me 20 minutes because I just kept laughing. But I eventually did it, closed it all up, never looked in there, just said, okay, something's in there, that's all it's going to be. Wrapped it all up, sent it out by UPS. Then UPS sent me back something saying, hey, you can click on this thing and go check it out, see what the results are. I waited a week before I did that. It came back as negative, and negative is a good thing in healthcare. I don't know. It sounds stupid, but there you are. Anyway, that took 7 minutes, and the podiatrist I had seen previously last October, it was a 3-minute appointment. I even said before I went in there to myself, you know what? This is what he just does. This is going to be 3 minutes, and I'm going to walk out. And sure enough, it was 3 minutes. He said, well, it's been good to see you. See you again next year. No, you're not seeing me again next year. I appreciate that the people who work for this particular hospital and work with these different people are actually giving me more time, if I need to talk to something, if they want to try to talk me into something, whatever, even if I don't agree, I appreciate that they're doing that. If you have medical people who are willing to do stuff like that to you, then that's a good thing. Last year, when I finally had an appointment with my somnambulist, the sleep doctor, I have troubles repeating, saying how that word is every once in a while, and there it is, somnambulist or something like that. And I hadn't seen him in like 4 or 5 years. I'd been seeing all the nurses, but he finally showed up. And I was in there with him for 35 minutes. I said, yeah, we're having a good conversation. And that's, I think, the best part of these people. Some of these people are really engaged. They're willing to talk to you and give you some assistance. And some of the others, they really don't care. So Anyway, that's where I'm at right now. Um, I hope I've mentioned something that at least might give some of you something to think about as far as pharmaceuticals, as far as if you have an appointment with doctors or nurses or whomever, are they treating you right? Are they giving you at least something that maybe you can use? Or in my case, something that eventually you find someone else who works in healthcare who can tell me what some of these things are. I don't know. These deductibles, they're crazy. And, you know, it's a deductible because of Social Security. Without the Social Security, I would probably have to be paying a lot more because there wouldn't be any discounts. There wouldn't be anything else. Y'all, we need to help and need to hope that certain things regarding our prescriptions, our medical providers, is going to come down at some point by the current administration and all these different departments they have. I'm not holding my breath, but that's what we do. Anyway, my name is Mitch. I hope you all have a wonderful day and ignore the background. It's dark. I've got computer problems and hopefully I'm going to hear from the company and they're going to ask me to send my computer to them so that they can fix it because I bought it new in January and it's got issues. That's how it is. Anyway, y'all take care. Enjoy the day.